Hello Tandem fandom and happy Pride! Welcome to the Tandem Collective YouTube channel where you can find the latest book recommendations, releases, news, and tips from Team Tandem. So we have had such brilliant Pride content this month, and it has also been Audiobook Awareness Month, and in our book a day recommendations we've had an audiobook recommendation every single day for June. So I thought that I would combine these two themes and today give you 5 and 5 recommendations for LGBTQIA memoirs that I've listened to as audiobooks. I really highly recommend listening to memoirs whenever possible because they are usually either entirely or in part recorded by the author, and you just get a different depth listening to an author read about their life in their own voice. So these are LGBTQIA memoirs that I have really enjoyed listening to in honor of Audiobook Month and, of course, Pride Month. I'm going to recommend is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. In this book, George talks about coming of age as a queer Black man in New Jersey and then later on, I believe, in Virginia. His story is so gripping. I listened to the entire book in one day. I could not put it down, or rather take my headphones out. It talks about double marginalization and that experience of being not just queer but also Black. And it is a self-proclaimed YA memoir-manifesto. It does deal with George's sexual assault experience in great detail, and it's really a useful story and telling of an experience for young queer kids as well as allies that want to support their LGBTQIA friends and family and community. So I highly recommend All Boys Aren't Blue. It's a quick read, and if that hasn't convinced you yet, this is also one of the most banned books in the United States at the moment, so that should give you even more incentive to read or listen to this book. The next book I'm going to recommend is This Much Is True by Miriam Margolyes. And most people of my generation know Miriam as Professor Sprout from the Harry Potter film franchise. However, she has had such an incredible and layered career over the course of her life. And in this book, and the audiobook, she talks about these different experiences from doing voiceovers to stage work, lots of funny, quippy anecdotes about other actors whose names you will recognize. She's also a proud lesbian and has been with her partner for nearly 60 years. So she talks about her sexual experiences and discovery, as well as being a Jew in Britain during the time that she was coming up, and how that has changed in her identity as she's gotten older. She makes even the seemingly cringiest of anecdotes absolutely hilarious. If you've ever seen her talk live or a recording of her talk live, you know how funny she is, and she brings all of that personality and insight as well to her memoir. The next book I'm going to recommend is Burn the Page by Danica Roem. Danica Roem, for those who don't know, was the first openly transgender elected official in the United States. Certainly the first transgender official elected to a state position. So she was first elected as a Virginia state representative and then to the Virginia State Senate. So in this book, Danica talks about the different factors that led her to run in her first election, her career experience and her history of activism, and she also talks about her childhood and her transition eventually. She talks about growing up in a multi-generational household where She had a lot of loss, a lot of different role models, and where she didn't see eye to eye politically with her mother. And that was really interesting to read about somebody who is such an activist, but can still have a relationship with family, even though they disagree on certain things that are fundamental. So that was a really interesting aspect of this story. She also talks about her journalism career and her pathway to being an elected official. I found it really interesting and different from a lot of the memoirs that I have listened to and read, because you get a lot of the political background and minutia of this process that she went through. So I really do recommend listening to Danica Rome's Burn the Page, read in her own voice. My next memoir recommendation is Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing by Lauren Howe. And this audiobook is narrated in part by Lauren and in part by Kate Blanchett. Lauren's story starts off in that she was a child in Children of the God, which was a international cult that promoted child abuse, child sexual abuse, and violence. So she was brought up in this cult and eventually was able to leave the cult. Then it goes into her experience in the US Air Force. And this was during the height of the don't ask, don't tell policy in the US, wherein you just, if you were gay or bi, you just were expected to stay under the radar, really. And they weren't going to ask as long as you didn't say anything. So Lauren, being a lesbian, struggled with this. She was harassed. She had her car burned because of her sexuality, which is, of course, a hate crime. She also struggled with homelessness and addiction. And at the end of the day, though, this is a really, really inspirational story Lauren tells, going from being a child of this renowned cult to being in the Air Force, and then finding her own way and being able to live freely in her sexuality. So that is Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing by Lauren Howe. My final recommendation today comes from this part of the pride flag. And if you don't recognize it, this yellow with the purple circle in the middle represents intersex, or the I in LGBTQIA. Now, this part of the pride and queer community often gets left out. It's not talked about as much. And one of the reasons is that a lot of intersex kids are brought up with a lot of shame surrounding their bodies. So that is one of the reasons why Inverse Cowgirl was written by intersex activist Alicia Roth Weigel. So somebody who's intersex means that they were born somewhere between the sexes, and there are many variations of this. In Alicia's case, she was born with testes, with XY chromosomes, but with female genitals as well. And her parents were advised by doctors when she was born to make her look like a girl. So the male genitalia were removed, and she was essentially raised as a girl. However, she still has those XY chromosomes, and the removal of those male genitals have caused her lots of health problems later on in life. And not to mention that she didn't have a say in that choice of having that life-altering surgery. So Alicia campaigns now to end intersex surgery in various organizations and on the floors of lots of political capitals within states and also in Washington, D.C. This book is very much Alicia's story from that pivotal point at birth when she had that surgery, through childhood and learning more about her body and being told to keep quiet about her body. She also talks about her travel experience, which is extensive, and has definitely joyful moments and devastating moments to it. And finally, she talks about breaking her silence, which she actually did on the Senate floor in Texas, her adopted home state. And she actually did this to help with a bathroom bill, which was all the rage several years ago in states. A lot of conservative politicians were trying to pass bills saying that people had to use the bathrooms that were assigned to the sex that they were born with or that they had the chromosomes of. And Alicia, who is very female presenting, came to the floor of the Texas Senate and said, well, if this passes, then I would need to use the men's bathroom. And I feel like that's exactly in opposition to what you're trying to do here. So she really unraveled their entire argument, and they weren't able to pass that bill, thankfully. Much of this book also talks about how the I in LGBTQIA often gets left out and marginalized even within the LGBTQIA community. So she's really working in this book and throughout her life to elevate the voices of intersex people, and just an awareness of people who are intersex, and that there is nothing wrong with their bodies, that they shouldn't feel shame, and that intersex surgery on children, or gender affirming surgery rather, should be banned. I found it so enlightening, and really recommend that you listen to this book, especially if your knowledge about the intersex community is more limited, especially compared to some of the other communities within the LGBTQIA community. So that is my 5 and 5 LGBTQIA audiobook memoirs for the month of Pride and the month of audiobook awareness. I hope you enjoyed my recommendations. If you have your own recommendations, please let me know in the comments, because I'm always looking for more. And let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you're going to be putting them on your TBR, which one was the most intriguing to you today. You can always sign up for our newsletter with the link in the bottom of the video description to get all of the latest creator opportunities straight to your inbox. And you can find us on Instagram and on TikTok as Tandem Collective. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.